To another episode of the Light and Dark Photography Podcast. I am your host, John Mansfield. Every week I have conversations with photographers and other creative entrepreneurs who share tips and strategy and inspiration. So whether you are on the light and airy side, dark and moody, or anywhere in between, we are here to help you grow your community, build your business, and create the lifestyle you always dreamed of. Today, my guest is Stephen Lowe. He is a wedding photographer based in Columbus, Ohio. And on the show today, we are talking about why it is time for you to raise your prices and how you can do that strategically with purpose. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this topic. I know pricing is like a touchy deal that not a lot of people like to talk about. So whenever you suggested that topic, I was like, yes, let's do this.
That's exciting because I love talking about pricing, but at the same time, I'm just going to forewarn you, there's going to be I have a lot of thoughts on this, but at the same time, it's impossible to give very, very concrete, you need to raise your prices by X, Y, and Z, because we know how touchy pricing is, and there's so many factors. But I don't know, I think that intro you gave, it was exactly what I personally needed to hear. This is not coming from, hey, I know what's best for you. It's more like a cautionary tale. It was somebody else telling me, no, wait, you need to raise your prices. And that's kind of how I got talking about this conversation. I'm like, okay, wait, nice. Oh no, this is where I need to be.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. It's very, timely. In fact, because even last night, my wife and I were talking about how, I'm in a pretty, it's a smaller town, outside of Houston. I'm like a good hour and a half outside of Houston. And I'm a fairly big fish in the market here for pricing wise. And we were like, should I just lower my prices so that I can book some easier ones that are just here in town? Or should I stay with what I have or even raise my prices? I'm like, I will probably pick your brain about
Let's
this
talk.
too,
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm going to need to hear this episode as well. But before we get into all the pricing and everything, give us a little background about you, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm a wedding photographer in Columbus, Ohio. I've been I photographed my first wedding over a decade ago, and I used to cringe at saying that, but now I'm like, oh yeah, I think that gives me a little credit. I'm not I'm not young anymore, but I was I have experience, and 10 years seems puts me well into professionalism. I haven't been doing it full time for 10 years, but
and that 10 years, that's a good milestone, because I know a lot of the photographers that I talked to 10 years ago, they were in high school or middle school even. I'm just all right, I sometimes feel really old. I'm mid 30s. I'm okay,
that's right.
But yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So 10 years ago, or more than a decade ago, you photographed your first. How long have you been full-time photographer?
I've been full-time since 2015.
Okay, nice.
So that was the year I married my wife, and then yay! We can celebrate our annual milestones together.
Yes.
But yeah, it's been a whole wave of things, being full-time and learning what that means. And I think now's the time to really consider it's not my only source of revenue, if that makes sense. Nice. So big picture, we have a couple rental, we have real estate projects and things like that. And so that brings in income. So to say that I'm a full-time wedding photographer is true. It's my main source of income, but I do also have other projects happening here and there. And I think that's always going to keep changing and growing.
Yeah. I feel a lot of entrepreneurs, we are I can't have everything in one basket over here. I've got to do something. And, the last few years or so, I have had everything in one basket, and just dove hard into wedding photography. I'm now starting to pull some of those eggs out and place them in other baskets, because I'm there's other things that I want to do. And but yeah, there is almost that feeling of, well, am I less professional or less credible if I'm not doing this 100% of the time. But yeah, it's like
I love that you bring that up, because for the longest time, I thought I had to be like wedding photography or photography in general had to be my full source of income in order for me to be like a professional. Then the more I get talking to other photographers, and the more, just the longer I've been in the industry, and realize, no, that does not make sense. Like, it's all ultimately creating a life that you want to live, and like, how do you balance that with your family situation, your work situation? And sometimes you can find a great balance. If you love your work, don't quit it to pursue something that's not gonna necessarily be as practical either. So I feel like for the longest time, I felt shame that I was not a full-time photographer, and then I made it here for a while, and then I didn't feel any different. It was just like, the grass is not greener on this side. There's a lot more responsibilities, but it's not necessarily greener. It works out for a lot of people, and it could be great. And I love what I do, but it doesn't have to be, all your eggs don't have to be in this one basket here.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like that mindset. You know, I think that sometimes we hear other photographers talk about how, you know, I've been full-time for a decade, or I've been doing this for however long. And like, it feels like that's a milestone that you have to get to be considered a real photographer instead of just like a hobbyist. But like, if you're building a business and you still enjoy your 9 to 5, like I know a few photographers that still work their 9 to 5 because they love it. You know, one of my associates, she's a veterinary nurse, and she loves that. Like, that is her passion. She also has a passion for wedding photography, so does that as well. And it's like, you're not any less because you're doing multiple things. So I know we kind of like hijacked your intro there.
No, you're good.
These
are things I wanted to like mention, talk about. I have somebody,
Well, that's cool. Okay, so awesome. So over the 10 years or 7 full time, and even with your other real estate adventures and things, has there been a lesson or a piece of advice or something that you've received that just really changed the way that you look at life or business in general? It doesn't have to be like the best, because like anytime someone asks me like, what's the best this, I'm like, I don't know. There's so many good things. Like, I've had so much good advice over the years, but like, just one that was just like, oh yeah, that was really good. Like, this changed just kind of your mindset.
I think somebody must have uttered this to me, but it's been kind of like circling my mind more recently, is most things matter less than you think, and certain things matter more than you want it to. I was like, that's just like a very vague type of situation. But then I find that to be very applicable in a lot of like, even just creativity. Like, when it comes to photography, sometimes it's not necessarily the best photography that makes the biggest difference. It's about how you care for your clients and all that. But that's not necessarily the thing that a lot of photographers want to hear. It's not about your work or having your work and the quality of work being your full identity. And it's like, that can matter not that much. And that could be that. I mean, that's hard to hear. Even for me, sometimes it's just like, oh, like, I'm not my work. Like, I don't have to put my full identity and value based on what I produce. I was like, that's kind of freeing, but at the same time, it's just like, oh, that's kind of like, wait, why am I a photographer?
Right. Especially like whenever you've put so many hours into like honing in your craft and learning how light works and all the different things. And then you're like, oh, but that doesn't actually matter as much as I thought it did.
I was like, is editing this photo another 2 hours after the 4 hours I put in, is that going to bring home another $1? No. No.
And will your clients notice?
No.
Sometimes no. There are so many times like that I'll be going through and like just trying to get the skin tones just perfect. And then I do the like revert to original. I'm like, like from back here, it looks the same. But like me, like leaning into my computer,
Zoomed in
just like getting really
100%,
close.
yeah.
I'm like, if they blow this up on a billboard and they're standing up there, I want them to be able to see all this detail.
Exactly. Yup.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good piece of advice and a really good mindset to have going through just life. Like there are so many things that don't matter as much as you think they do. Like our minds were continually thinking about like, oh, but this is such a big thing. But then whenever you step back from it, it's like, actually that's not really that big. Like I'm inflating it in my mind because I'm going over it over and over again.
That's right.
But no one else is thinking about this.
No. And like even with the editing example, like like there's something about it that I want to believe that actually makes a difference. Like the sum of all the parts eventually, like the obsession of making something perfect, hopefully that shows across your work and somebody can like really connect and relate to it. But the individual ones that I feel like that take up so much mental space sometimes just needs to be spoken out loud into the universe. And it kind of it's like when fear is spoken out loud, it loses like so much power. And I actually saw, this is so off tangent maybe, but like even just when you experience trauma, being able to speak that out and share that with somebody within, I think, 2 weeks really significantly decreases your chances of PTSD over the long term. And it's just like fear has a hold of us when it's living inside our brain. And this is like, I think so many creatives, entrepreneurs, like we obsess, we love to create and we want to make everything perfect. We want to micromanage, but sometimes it's when you put it on paper or saying it out loud, it allows the world to, I don't know, there's value in saying that, like it's away from me now. It's not going to all consume me fully, but it is there in the universe and it kind of loses its power in a sense.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. My camera just died, apparently. If that's,
I see you're using Fuji.
Showing up here. I am using Fuji. This was the one time I always go through my checklist of things to do before recording.
Yeah.
And this one probably because I had not had coffee yet this morning. I was just like, camera's good, throw that on, and didn't even look. Let me see if I can change this battery real quick.
Yeah.
And throw it back up there. Because I can still see your face, but I want you to be able to see my face just to have that extra little bit of connection. So let's see. I don't have any standby music, but, imagine some for about... There we go. Perfect. Oh, Carnival. Okay, love it.
This is not a joke. I'm just kidding. Is this a time for me to just talk to myself? Now that I have live, I can just hijack this podcast. I should pull up Facebook to see if anyone's saying anything fun. Technical difficulty.
Okay. Can you see me again?
Hold up.
Not yet.
Yes, you're live. Woo.
Okay. Yay. Okay. Sweet. Cool. That was a quick, fun little battery change.
Switcheroo.
Thanks for entertaining the listeners while I was gone.
No worries.
Okay. I don't remember where we were. I'm sorry. I think we were talking about how some things are more important or not as important as we really think, and that whole giving weight to and giving weight and bandwidth to things that really don't require that much, but we feel like they do. And I think that's so good to really assess and take a step back and not just regurgitate what you've been thinking and what your mind says is important, but really holistically look at everything and be like, okay, does this require this much of my time?
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, so I do want to get into pricing. I know we kind of mentioned earlier, this is a touchy topic, and definitely I love the disclaimer that you gave earlier. Like we are not here to tell you you definitely need to raise your prices because we don't know your cost of doing business and all that. Yep. But the odds are you probably need to raise your prices. But yeah, like looking at like as we look at our businesses, what are some signs that we should raise our prices?
Man, I mean, there's so many. One of them being, chances are, like you just mentioned, if you haven't raised your prices in the past 3 years, aka me, 4 years now, you probably should, considering the way everything has changed in the past 4 years. And if you're still charging the same rate, that's one sign alone. And I think I didn't take that to heart. I was just like, oh great. I was happy with my prices. I still wasn't like a value photographer. I mean, I wasn't a cheap photographer. Yes. I'm not on the, I'm still, I would say 90 to 100%, like the top tier of the market. But at the same time, I was, everybody around me was adapting to the change, and I kind of been left behind. And part of it, I was like, I can blame the pandemic, and I think so much has caught us by surprise that being the people-loving people that we are, especially I'm talking photographers, I'd imagine we do a lot of weddings because we love the people more so than like I love clicking my camera shutter, right. We're there for people, we're there for a story, and we love people so much that the past couple of years I know so many fellow photographers that kind of sacrifice our business, just the way we want to do things for the sake of like helping your clients out in a really, really tough time. And it's been a busy couple years. You're talking to one right now. Yeah. I feel that. And so you're like, okay, great. I'll just be flexible. And I know that it's in the contract, blah, blah, blah. But I want to love and care for you well here. And so we just kind of go with the flow. And it's just been so busy. And I know so many of us are just burnt out to the point where, this is not sustainable. And so I think that would be another sign where like, can I be doing this for another few years, 5 years, a decade? Like, if this is what you want to be doing at the rate you want to do it, and if it's like you can't say a resounding yes, then yeah, maybe take a look at your pricing. And another sign that comes to mind is when somebody looks in you in the face, be like, you need to charge more. Yeah, that was the one that kind of like woke me up a few times. It took 4 people saying that within like 2 weeks, and I was like, do I really? And that kind of brought up the first question. Yeah, I haven't raised my prices since like 2018. I'm like, yes, I do. Yes. And I think it's part of it is just having the confidence to say that. Gaining the confidence to be like, no, I'm worth more. Yeah. I think that was a difficult thing for me is once my prices got over the point of where I would see myself like as a 25-year-old or something getting married. A lot of my clientele's around mid-20s to mid-30s, and once I went over that price range of what I would personally have paid for a photographer, it was difficult for me to go much more than that, because it's like, well, I don't want to take advantage of people, right. and like I wouldn't pay more than this, so why should I ask you to pay more? And really, it is finding that value and valuing yourself in your craft and seeing what you can provide for others. Plus, I'm talking about like 10 years ago, and 10 years ago, like the prices have changed a lot, and the wedding industry has changed a lot. And I think a lot of times we kind of get stuck in our minds like, well, I wouldn't pay $5,000 for a wedding photographer, so I'm not going to go over $5,000. Like that's my cap. Yeah, that's such a good point. I think when you say that, I was like, I can't afford my own services, but that's okay, because ultimately, like, nobody can tell you how much you can charge, how much you should charge. Just being, it's such a, I mean, what we do, we are artists, and to put an objective value on art, to make it into science, is challenging. There's so many factors, like if you do album sales, if you like how many years you've been in it, what other expertise are you offering other than great photography, like there's so much that goes into it. But at the same time, as long as you feel you're comfortable with the value, the value that you offer is that at the level that you're actually charging, I think you're good. But on the other side, I think most of us are at a place where it's the opposite, where we're not charging enough for the value that we are offering, especially with every single year in the industry. Like, we grow in experience and knowledge and expertise, and we're offering that to our new couples. And I think that's something that's so undervalued, in our industry these days.
Yeah, I agree. And it's hard to like contextualize what that's worth. It's like, what is another year or another, 25, 30 weddings under your belt worth in experience? Right. Like, what is that experience worth monetarily to raise your prices? Because like last year I've had 35 more weddings of experience than I did last year. And like going even further back, because I went probably a good 2 years without really raising my prices, because it was like that, it was nearing that dead zone of like that $3,500 range, to where it's like you're too expensive for the lower end budget weddings, but you're not expensive enough for the higher end, because they're like, why are you only $3,500?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it was like nearing that dead zone. So I was like, I'm just going to chill here. I'm just going to camp out. And yeah, I think that like couple of years of all that experience building up, and like even just listening to podcasts like this, like I listen to so many business podcasts and photography podcasts, and that's continuing to grow my experience, because I'm learning things from others and then implementing it into my business. Is there, I know there's not like a formula or anything, but like, what do you think about, like, how should we be assessing how much we've grown over the last year or 3 or however long it's been since we raised our prices? I know that's a loaded question.
How do we assess that? Man, I have like, I personally have a formula for myself, of like when I would give myself raises, and at least now I do after, all this conversation. Right, but a lot of it is, I think, just, man, I'm at a loss for words as far as like assessing. I think experience is one thing, and what you offer is one thing, but what you charge honestly doesn't have to be correlated to any of that. There's always gonna be worse photographers that don't offer the experience level that you do, that's gonna charge more, and there's gonna be amazing photographers who don't charge as much as you do. And so it's kind of essentially, you can do what you want at this point, which is kind of crazy sounding.
I mean, that's like what you just said about like there are some less experienced photographers charging more and more experienced charging less. I am constantly roaming other photographers' websites for potential guests for the show. And there have been a few that I'm like, I can tell like you're in your first year or two, and like I can see that through your work. But then I go to their pricing page, I'm like, you are charging more than me. Like, how are you doing that? And then there are others that have been in the game for 15, 20 years. And I'm like, you need to raise your prices. Like you're like charging what I am or less than that. And, I think that is the hard thing about pricing yourself, is there is no formula. There's no like calculator that you can just type in the numbers and then it spits out a number, and this is exactly what you should be. charging?
I think the best basis is not to compare with anybody else when you're initially establishing what you want to charge, because do your cost of business, the lifestyle you want to live, and then also just like how much you need to bring in for your family. Like, I pay for healthcare for my family because you know, freelance and entrepreneurial life like that means I have to either charge more or book more weddings. So I think if you can figure out your target, like how many weddings at this, like your average income you want for the entire year, and kind of go backwards and reverse engineer what you need to charge, I think that's going to be very, very eye-opening in terms of, oh, I'm very undervaluing myself. And so nobody can really tell like what you can charge. But man, even in Columbus, like the average price of wedding photography spent, I forgot who put the report together, but it was just a huge survey, and it started around like maybe 5 years ago. It's probably averaged $3,500 for wedding photography. Now it's probably closer to $5,500. And so like keep that. And I wasn't even paying to just all this happening. And there's photographers here that start at 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. And I was like, is that the world I want to, like, you know, be in still, you know? And so, and it's okay to not say yes, or like, hey, I'm just want to be on top of the chain, I'm just gonna charge more. But the other thing is like, make sure you can actually book the amount of weddings you want to. And I think that's kind of like the formula I ended up implementing for myself post my price raise very, very recently, right before this conversation, or like just maybe a month ago. And after I raised my prices, and this was like a generous raise for, you know, I need to compensate for the past 4 years. It was like a significant, like closer to 25% overall raise of everything. And the first 4 people I talked to ended up booking. I was like, okay, what was I doing before? And I am making sure I'm offering more value. Like my goal is not to do a ton of weddings. I want to do 10 to 15 a year, probably ideally closer to 10, and give it completely like my all every single wedding. Like, and I often do Indian weddings or fusion weddings, so there's multi-day. And so the idea of like, I really get to dive deep with these couples and spend all my time with them. Like, I love that. And I know that's not for everybody, but I was like, that's kind of the way I want to do things. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, every 3 weddings that I book, I get to raise my prices by a certain percentage. And just like very systematically, it's like, if I'm still booking at this rate, that means the market's still out there. Just kind of almost like a feedback. You're like, hey, you're not too expensive, to still book the ideal clients that you want. Yeah, and that's a whole nother topic. Like you said, you mentioned you were in the dead zone, like too expensive for the people just kind of wanting the budget weddings. And then for people who have the budget, they're like, you're too cheap for me to hire. I'm even not looking at that. I'm looking at the average, 8 to 12,000, and you're charging 5. You're not what I want. Just even you're being rolled out because you're too cheap, and you're like, oh. And so I think the market is big enough for everybody. It's just kind of, you get to decide where you want to hover and live in. Do what's best for your family.
Yeah. And that like being too cheap sounds weird for a lot of people. I remember being at a conference, and I don't remember who the speaker was, but it was like 2016. So I'm probably not going to remember. But he was talking about how he was wanting to get more into the luxury market and like raise his prices to like $10,000 from like $2,500. And it was just like, I'm just gonna revamp my website, make it look more luxurious, add all of these more customized like client experience parts into his workflow. And he had one of the first people inquire, and she was just like, okay, so what's all included in the 10,000? And he like went through this list of all these things, and she was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I was expecting to spend more like 25,000 for all that. So I think you're just a little bit, under experienced for what we're looking for. And he was just like, what? Like, he had never heard of anyone getting booked for 25,000, but there are those couples out there. And, and like, that is something that, someone who's charging $1,500 right now, and just like, what? There are people that can charge 5,000 and book consistently. There are, I forget how many millions of people that were getting married this year. It was like the biggest increase of weddings since the 80s.
That's right. Yeah.
So many weddings going on. So there are a lot out there in every single different pricing bracket. And you'd mentioned something about like systematically raising your prices after so many bookings. Were you talking about like after, if you're still like hitting a percentage of like the leads that come in, if you're booking a certain percentage of those, then you raise your prices, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, great question. So I recognize I'm probably in a very different boat than a lot of photographers out there, but I don't get a ton of inquiries. But if they do come in, it's the 90% booking rate in general. They usually come from planners or past couples or siblings of past couples that are getting married, and they like verbally committed to me like years ago, and they're like, okay, this is happening. Just wait till I find a boyfriend and fiance and then wedding. I'm like, okay, great. And so when they inevitably reach out, like it's oftentimes a sure thing because they've seen how I work, they know the experience that they want, and they've already picked me, and I essentially just get to quote them. And so I have multiple. I'm at a place where I have a few collections, different hours. Some include travel to wherever you want in the U.S. type of situation, and others are like 8-hour one photographer, just me showing up. And so I want to say I am able to fit everybody into the collections that I have. If not, we can always do custom collections. But that being said, I make sure like regardless of collections that they choose, it's worth it. Like it's worth my time. I think that's really important. Sometimes people end up charging more, but losing more money as they charge more for their higher collections because they also give away significantly more. I make sure, like the more I charge, actually more I make still, which is, where you want to be. But I would say every 4 or 5 people that actually just reserve me as their wedding photographer for 2023, I'm raising my prices. And just because this is so fresh to me, I'm probably the first bump I'm going to give myself is probably just 10%. Across the board. And for me, I have like a full breakdown Excel sheet calculator of like profit margins of everything, my estimated hourly costs, AI outsourcing, everything built into my collection. So I know that, like all the collections are actually worth my time. I'm not spending 14 hours making less and less and less or something like that.
Right. And I do like what you mentioned there with, as the packages get bigger and you're doing more things and including more things, your profit needs to increase as well. Because that was something whenever I was first forming my collections 10 years ago, there was no education. I couldn't find any education online about this stuff. And somehow I put together an Excel spreadsheet of my cost of doing business and figured out, okay, how much do I need to make with all of this? And I formed each one to where I was receiving the same amount of profit from each collection. Which was not great. Because I was like, if they book me for 6 hours, I make this much in profit. That's great. And then I increased to 8 hours. So I'll just add this and I'll still make the same profit. And that's great. And I'll make the same across the board, whether it's 6 or 8 or 10 hours. And then people kept booking like the 8 or 10 or all day. And I was like, oh, wait. Oh no! I am doing more work on
but
these
not
days,
getting paid for that work. Your hourly rate anymore. Is just
my hourly rate went down to like $7.50 an hour between everything that I was doing, prepping for a wedding, all the calling and editing and everything afterwards. Plus, I was not doing well with Lightroom back then, so it was just it was super slow, and it was just I was adding more work to my plate, but I was like, no, this is great because I'll kind of know if I book, 3 weddings a month, then it's consistent pay for myself. Right. It's different for the business, but it's consistent for myself because I get paid the same no matter what I do. And yeah, it was just reducing my hourly wage. But yeah,
I think that's such a good reminder though. Like, we all start somewhere. I remember one of my first weddings, I did photo and video by myself for $700. And
so
it was
in each hand.
Photo was $500, adding video was another $200.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I pulled it off. I had like tripod set up everywhere. I get there early and then trying to edit that together and taking photos. Then of course I was like renting gear, so I had to go out, set everything up. And it made no sense. But the thing is, like, we all start somewhere. I've done free weddings. I've done the Craigslist weddings. But I think I don't want people to almost skip that character building phase because you can teach somebody these things, but I find it very hard for people to take it to heart unless they actually go through the struggle. Right. So, I mean, do with, whatever you can with that knowledge and information. Like, if you can learn these lessons without actually having to learn these lessons, amazing. Like, power to you. Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit more toward the cost of doing business for anyone out there that's just like, what is this? I'm not familiar. Ooh. Like, whenever I was my first packages where I was just like, 8 hours, $500. Sure, that sounds great. I'll do it. Yeah. There was no thought of any of the cost of doing business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is going to be interesting because I'm married to a CPA and she helps me with this stuff. No, but I think there's the way you do counting just breaks down into different categories. And as photographers, there are just so many things we need to take into consideration beyond just showing up and bringing a camera. Like, for example, insurance, health insurance for your family if that's something you need, gear insurance, liability insurance, and just beyond that, all the subscriptions that we all need, whether it's editing subscriptions, like gallery delivery, storage on Google Drive or Backblaze, something uploading wise. Adobe's not cheap if you have the whole Creative Suite. And so there's a ton of large annual costs that we built in, not to even mention like anything marketing, whatever. All these things are often neglected when it comes to doing cost of business. And of course, you have your camera. I'm assuming everybody has like roughly, I don't know, at least $10,000 worth of gear from here and there. And those you get to depreciate over time because they're not going to last forever. You need to make sure you keep, like update the shutter or like replace the shutter, things like that. And so there's all of that. But beyond that, it's just your time that is the most often neglected. The hours you spend communicating with a client. And this is something I've learned from my wife, being like CPA, accountant. She was in a public firm back in the day. And so it was like, you have billable hours, like you track everything you do because it's your time and your time is worth something. I think for so many creatives, we think, I love what I do, and I have time right now, and that's okay. I'm just going to give that up because, I'd rather have more money, and that's totally fine. But I think there's at some point that scale is going to tip where you're going to have more money than you have time, and you're realizing, no, I need my time back, and so you want to streamline things a bit more. So as you grow your business, you're not going to have just fixed costs. Like, your costs are going to increase as well. So you want to make sure your revenue and your profits are actually keeping up with what you are having to pay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it's so good to hear, especially because I can remember being a fresh new baby photographer, not photographing babies, but me being very new on the scene, and not really knowing anything about the cost of doing business, and I didn't have a list of all of those, fixed costs and the annual costs and just like the variable costs of doing business. Everything was just like, I don't know, this sounds good, and if I can make this, then that would be some great money. And then it quickly turned into like 0 to negative profit on some of those weddings, where I was just like, oh yeah, I've got, upkeep on my cameras, or I need to buy a second camera body because, I've got to have a backup, or get multiple lenses going at the same time. And like that kind of stuff just grew and grew and grew. And, it's really important if, listeners, if you have not done a cost of doing business, just sit down and go through, think of everything that you spend money on, spend time on in your business. It's going to be a long list. And that's really going to show you where that profit is going. And taxes was a big one for me. Once I hit the taxes and like sales tax and everything, I was like, why am I doing this? I really need to raise my prices.
And that's one thing that if you're a hobbyist, I know a good amount of photographers just try to do things under table, and that's, if you get away with it, good for you. Like, nobody likes paying taxes, but if you're trying to run a full-on legitimate business, like you just have to, right? You just have to make sure that you're putting that amount aside as you're doing all this, so you don't get screwed over either quarterly or at the end of the year.
Yes.
And the other I think biggest part is when we oftentimes we want to get into IPS or like offer products, albums, wall art, all the good stuff. I'm a firm believer in that, and I think it's just created an experience for my clients that is just unforgettable. But at the same time, I know for a long time I was undercharging, because the larger collections, I was like, oh, I'll throw in a canvas, I'll throw in a piece of wall art, and then suddenly the cost to me was like $700, $800, $1,000, $2,000, and I was just, that was my time and money, not to mention ordering and making sure things are right. And I put a guarantee on the artwork that I sell, so if anything's broken, damaged, shipped, or like fading, like I will replace it. Like there's value in that I need to be charging for. That is just, sometimes it's like, oh, you want to print? Here, I'll offer it at a cost because you're my friend. I like you. And
exactly.
It's going to come back and bite you in the butt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially like pricing all of that. Like I remember hearing, the 3X rule, where it was like, whatever your cost is for this, 16 by 20 print, you need to be charging at least 3 times that, because a third of that is going to taxes, and a third of it is the cost of the actual thing, and then you have your overhead and any margin in there. You need to be getting that. And I was like, no, well, it wasn't explained to me like that. It was just like, you need to be charging 3 times. I was like, no, I'm not going to price gouge.
Right.
Like, a lot of my clients are my friends, or they have become friends through this process. And if it costs me $16 to buy a 11 by 14 print, then I'll charge them like $20. Like, right. I'm just gonna throw a couple extra dollars for shipping and handling. And that was a mistake, because it
takes time, and like making the order, communicating about, is this a print you want crop this way. Obviously a lot of that can be automated if you have a system, but that adds into other costs. And I personally do a lot of printing in-house, so I was like, people think, oh, this is so fun, you can be really hands-on, and I do it for the sake, because I love being hands-on. Like, I love working with my hands and touching print and making sure it's framed properly. So I right now I still have the time to do it. I don't know if that's gonna last forever, but right now I do, and I absolutely enjoy it. But I have so many people come up to me, be like, oh, what does it look like to get into this? I was like, unless you are a nerd like me and want to mess with a printer it's gonna cost you so much more ink, just go to your local print store that has a pro printer to do that. Don't buy one. Starting off, $1,000. Replacing your ink alone, $800. Don't do it. No. I'll talk you out of it unless you really love it and actually can make a profit out of it.
Yeah, even just my like little inkjet printer over here for documents and stuff. It's just like, the printer itself was like $40, and then the ink to replace is like $80. I'm like, how did you make any money with including the ink in the first place.
Right.
But yeah, it is a lot, because I've always been, I am a geek like that too. We're just like, I loved being in the dark room and like developing my own film and just like seeing it come into the paper and pulling it out and hanging it up, and like that kind of tangible part of the photography. I love that.
Yeah.
But it is a big expense, and I was like,
oh my gosh,
I'm gonna leave it. I've got PicTime, and PicTime has so many different labs that I can choose from, and and the automation of just allowing someone else to do that and fulfill those. I still have them sent to me so I can hold them and quality check and all that. But yeah, I think there's so much, like, through this conversation is like, there's so much that goes into your pricing. There is no one and done solution for like, this is how much you should be charging, and then in 4 months you should raise to this amount. There's a lot that goes into it, and I think to have a successful business where you're really getting the profit margin that you should be getting for a sustainable life, and because like you mentioned earlier about healthcare, like as creatives we have to do that. Like if we want to take care of our family and have doctor's visits and keep our kids up to date for going to school and everything, it's like it's pretty pricey.
It adds up.
It does, yeah. And I know that there's, like, I've seen some posts where photographers like post on their social media of like, well, how much does why am I so expensive, and then like list out all these different things. I don't think that's helpful for your clients to like share all of this. Just a little side note, if anyone's like, how can I justify this for my clients, let me share everything that all of my expenses. I think just standing by your prices and being confident, and this is what I know that I need, and this is what I'm going to charge. And some people are not going to be able to afford it, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good lesson. Not everybody can afford your services, and that is okay. You rather be too expensive than too cheap. You rather, if they can't afford you, that's not your fault. Especially if you're providing the value, they know that they want you, but just don't have the budget for it. That's okay. I mean, it stinks. Like, you can make exceptions, but know that you have a standard that your business needs to uphold to stay sustainable. There you go.
Yeah, there we
go. Thank you. But yeah, you rather just give them all the love and effort that you can. Yeah. I think it is, I would say, talking about pricing is very overwhelming. And if you are a fairly new photographer, hearing all this, you're like, what the hell did I just get into? That's okay. I'm not saying you need to double your prices today. You need to triple your prices today or anything like that. But I think it's doing so not as a creative, but as a business owner. And that's kind of how we have to view ourselves. We're not just, this is fun. I get to meet people and take photos, and that is what you get to do. But if you want to do this long term, you want to make it a full-time thing or even part-time thing, you just know what is actually costing you. Like, weekends are getting more and more valuable for me because we have a 9-month-old and it's so fun, and that's the time I get to spend with her. So like, if I am going out on a weekend, I need to be making like my time's worth, and that value has gone up significantly since I have a daughter now. Like, there's so many factors that changes things, but don't be discouraged. I think I was so scared of raising my prices. Even I've done it so many times, and it always turns out fine. And there's always more people that can't afford me, and I just have to live with that fact. But there's more money out there than we realize. I think growing up on welfare and just not having a lot, I tend to think people only have as much money as I do. I graduated college thinking I'll be fine making $20,000 for life. You know, like must have. A lot of us think that way.
If I can make $25,000 a year, I'm going to be living large. This will be amazing.
Yeah, and so I think it's just we need to realize, wait, there's people out there that money is not a concern. That's the kind of crazy thing to me, because growing up, money is always concerned. Still is a concern. It's not just something you throw away. But there are, if that's the clientele we want to reach, you almost have to understand what is valuable to them more so than money, because at that point they are paying. They want the experience, and there's so many times I met with a couple or a mom, and then they tell me, like, I wish this was the experience I had with my other daughter. Money was an object, and so they ended up spending more with me because this is exactly what they wanted. I actually offered something that they are able to pay for, versus I just didn't offer it, like multiple day coverage or bigger albums. They're like, my daughter-in-law just never got an album from her photographer. Is it okay if I order one with you? I'm like, I'm not gonna say no. So here we are, and it was funny because we were just going through her engagement book. We were designing that together, and she started crying. And I asked her, "Why? Like, is everything okay?" She's like, first thing she said was, "I'm mad at you." I'm like, "What did I do wrong?"
Oh no.
I was like, "Oh no." But she's like, "This is too easy." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I spent the last 2 weeks on, I don't know, it was like Shutterfly or something, designing my daughter-in-law's album, and it kept crashing on me, and it took so long." She's like, 2 weeks, and you're doing this in front of me right now. It's not fair. I'm like, I'm sorry. I just didn't know what to say. It was like, I want, like, my job is not complete unless you have something real and tangible in your hand. And they spend way beyond, like, what I personally am comfortable spending on myself, because, like, for them, it wasn't about the money. They wanted the experience. And I think as long as the value that you are offering is close to what you believe people are wanting to be charged, I think you can do that. Don't be afraid of raising prices. The market's bigger than you think.
Yes. Yeah. I 100% agree. And I know that is, it's hard to hear if you are on that lower end budget right now, because you're like, yeah, sure, Steven. Like, people pay you a lot of money. You can say that you've booked those people, but I haven't. And I still get people who are just like, $1,500. No, that is too pricey. Yeah. Because when I was charging $1,500, I had people who were like, no, you're charging 4 figures. I'm out of here. And like we talked about earlier, there are so many millions of couples getting married. Yeah. There are so many, even in your market. I know that we like to say that our markets are saturated, but they're saturated with people looking for people. And you can be one of those people, and you're going to attract some people who are not your people. And that's okay. But as you're growing as a photographer, you start to be able to attract the people who really value what you're doing and know how to speak to them and all that. And that goes into a whole other marketing
that's
conversation.
The whole thing about running a business. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many aspects of running a business, but like there are people out there who value what you do and will pay what you need to charge for that. Yeah. And you may not find them right away, but they are out there. And I think that's what I really need to hear right now, because I recently doubled my price from what I was charging about 1.5 years ago to what I charge now is nearly double. And
it's a scary jump.
Is a scary jump. Yeah, I would not recommend that quick of a jump, but I had been, doing the I'll raise it $300. I'll raise it a little bit, and it was not a big enough increment to really change anything. In doing that big of a jump, that I also, we talked before we started recording, my wife recently started a 9-to-5 job. So we have dual income now in our home. So I have a little bit more flexibility and leniency of it's okay if I don't get booked right away, because we're not relying on just my income anymore. And that's, I understand that's a privilege that not everyone gets when you're formulating your pricing. So I don't know. There's a lot to go into it. I hope this is really helpful for everyone. If you still feel a little like discouraged and lost about this, hit us up and ask questions. And I know I'm just like offering that for you, Stephen, but like I know
I was gonna say, like, I personally love chatting with people. I offer mentoring, but some of the stuff I think is just knowledge that I want people to have, just because it's helpful, and resources I wish I had, like, you know, in the past decade or so. And I think I would have made it either further or just had the confidence. Like, you know, in the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned four separate people told me to raise my prices, and I was like, okay, I finally gave in. I was like, why did it take so much budgeting and nudging? And I was like, maybe this is one of those 4 people in your life that right now that's just like, hey, go do it now. Like, don't maybe think about it, but actually do it. And one of the photographers that spoke really like she uttered words, "Your family deserves more." And I was like, ooh. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
And it's just like, I'm in a super sappy phase right now. I'm generally a very sappy guy. And so when she said that, I was like, oh, wait, yeah, it's not about me. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like me, my business. I was like, I bring home money for my family, but it's just like, wait, it just almost like tied it together to like, no. Like, I know, she knows like I was, for the longest time, like the sole earner for the family. And she's like, no, your family deserves more. Like, you deserve more, but your family does too. I was like, oh, yeah. I can raise my price without feeling selfish because, yeah, it's not just for me personally, like wanting, you know, luxuries in my life. It's like, it's for my kids, for healthcare, it's for, you know, living the life that we want to live, creating the life that we want to live. Yeah. But exactly. So if you are, yeah.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I would just say, if you have any questions, like DM me, we can chat, we set up a time to talk. I love connecting with other photographers, especially like if you just have questions. I don't have all the answers, but I have an Excel sheet that does. I'm just kidding. Cool. It helps structure the way I do things, and sometimes it's really helpful for people to see. It can be overwhelming, but it just boils down to trusting. Like, honestly, it's like just trusting the numbers, because numbers don't lie. Like, you can't outrun your costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to add in there, like, you don't have to live out that starving artist mentality. I know that we talk about that a lot, or people talk about that a lot, you know, I'm a starving artist, and, you know, artists are just, you know, underappreciated. You don't have to be underappreciated. Like, the world's changing. People are valuing art a lot more these days, and also they have in the past. We just didn't always see it. I love that. I've loved this conversation. I think is really something that I needed to hear today. So I know there are definitely we're just speaking to each other right now. But yeah, that. And I can cut this from later if the answer is no. But that Excel spreadsheet that you have, would that be something you'd be willing to share? Like, if people DM'd you to just, like, you know, a blank one, you don't have to keep all of your information in there.
I'm actually working to make it more accessible. Right now, it's very manual. Like, there's so much things going on that's only in my head. But I'm hoping to make it a plug and play, so people, it's not a cost of doing business calculator. I think there's a couple out there that are pretty good, but this one's literally how I structure my collections, just to make sure the higher I go, maybe I share it with you and you let me know if it's worth sharing.
Sounds good.
But it's just like, you want to make sure that it's the more you charge, the more you make. We calculate profit margin, and how do you get when you give yourself raises, like what percentage you go up by, and it just kind of tracks things. It's not a very pretty thing yet. But I'm hoping it will be down the road. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that sounds like it's a lot more of like those formulas and stuff all over to calculate everything. But yeah, no, so I thought it was like a cost of doing business type calculator. No. But yes, there are a ton of those that are really helpful. I actually also have one. Yeah, I do have one. I
There you
created one.
go.
Like, I think it was like episode 3 or something.
Yeah.
So I'll drop that in the show notes. If y'all want a cost of doing business calculator, it is free. You do not have to buy anything. But yeah, and then yeah, I'm excited about your other calculator. Like
Yeah.
that.
We'll get
that
it
is
out.
difficult to try and like figure out all those like your different collections and what your cost is going into that collection with time and with tangible things like albums and wear and tear on camera bodies and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So awesome. Okay, before we wrap up today's conversation, what is something that you're loving this week? It could be literally anything.
There's so much, but this is easy for me. It's a Taylor Swift's Midnight album.
It's good.
Have you listened? Okay, good.
I have not listened to the whole thing yet. As we're recording this, it's like just been a few days since the release. But I've heard a few songs and
Yeah.
I really like it. There's one, I don't remember the name of it, but it's got like a very Billie Eilish sound to it.
Yes.
And I was
Yeah.
like, I like this. This is a different side of Taylor, which I feel like she has evolved over the years from her country time.
Oh my gosh,
as
yeah.
like 16-year-old Taylor to who she is now.
Yeah. It's funny. I
and
see
her
on TikTok,
music.
and
Yeah.
somebody was like, I never was a Taylor Swift fan. And then I listened, there's so much hype about her new album. I listened to it, and I'm mad that I wasn't a Taylor Swift fan. But and she's like completely in love with just like who Taylor Swift is now. I'm just like, yes. I think for me is just the character development of, like, I know she's a real person, and I don't want to like like pull her back into like a TV show or anything like that. But like the character development, like you can see publicly and what she lets on, and then the amount of like creativity and Easter eggs that she intentionally drops in places. Oh my gosh, it's like it's brilliant.
I love
Yeah.
puzzles and like what are those, not wild goose chases, but a scavenger hunt
Yeah.
where you're just like looking for things. I remember doing those in high school where we would just put like two of us would write out things that we had to do around town for a scavenger hunt, and then
Yeah.
everyone else would have to go do it. But yeah, like I feel that through all the Easter eggs that she's just like her like releasing the track titles at midnight on TikTok and all that kind of stuff. I'm just like, this is like, she thinks through everything and everything has a meaning.
Yep, the
Which
symbolism. She's like
yes.
queen of symbolism.
Yeah.
Like Midnight album, the Taylor Swift clock. Oh my gosh, you could. There's conspiracy theories, of course, and so yeah, you can spend years on TikTok now just going through all of her content. But it's been really fun. Yeah, this week has just been like. I was driving home from a wedding. I was just like, midnight, yes, let's go. And it can't stop. It's been on repeat.
Yeah. It was really good. I need to like throw the whole album on and just listen straight through.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, cool. Taylor Swift, Midnights. I am loving it's a TV show, I think maybe a mini series. I don't know the difference anymore because now TV shows are like
Movies.
8 episodes. Yeah, they're like 8-hour long episodes.
Yeah.
But it's Resident Evil, and it's a new, because there were like the Resident Evil movies back in the day, and then that started off as a video game, and there's a new TV show that is set, I think it's now. Yeah, it's set in like 2022, like post pandemic world, and it's the next generation after the original. What is Raccoon City and all that from the original movies and video game and stuff.
Wow,
it's really good. I really enjoyed it. The plot is great. There's some twists in there. The acting was really good. And yeah, it's, if you're a fan of the video games and stuff, there's some major characters that show up that I was like, how are they gonna like bring this into a real life type situation? And they did.
That's exciting.
So yeah, it was.
What platform
it was really
is
good.
it on?
It is on Netflix.
Okay, cool. Okay, I got that.
Yes.
Yeah. I love. I played some of the video games. Wasn't like super into it.
Same.
It was a little slow paced. But the movies, I was enthralled because growing up with Resident Evil, you kind of like,
Right.
oh, that's interesting. But
Yeah.
I just felt like it's so hard to do so much in just one movie, and it felt it was more like action oriented than story oriented. There's like
Yes.
fine line. So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this and see where.
I think
I
that's
love
why I
TV
really
series
liked
more
it.
so. Okay.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think that's why I really liked it, because they were able to go more into the plot and storyline and follow character development and like realizations of certain people in the story that I'm just like, what? Like you were drawing me along for like 4 episodes about this person, and then turned everything on its head, and now I don't like this person, and and yeah, it's
You're
just
here for the ride.
is a lot. And it's also, it's following the main characters, and it flashes back and forth between present day and then like them as teenagers, and the way that they merge those two stories and overlaying different things is really well done. I enjoyed
Nice,
it.
okay.
Even if you're not a Resident Evil fan, I think you'll really like it. It's not super like gory or like horror type. It is definitely more story based.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, Netflix, Resident Evil,
Yeah.
check it out. I might rewatch it. It was really good.
Nice.
Cool. Well, Steven, where can people find you? Where can they follow along? Shoot you a DM, say hey.
Yeah, Instagram's a great place to DM me. Light and Low. Light as in my journey, like light, and Low, my last name, it's just LO. And then my website, lightandlow.com. I'm trying to be a little bit more active. I'm officially starting to blog these days. Look at that.
Nice. Hey.
I'm gonna venture outside of the wedding content world, I think. So follow me there if you're curious. And I always say this, somebody always asks, but don't follow me on TikTok. It's just irrelevant.
Yeah. Are you a TikTok scroller, like just like watching the videos, or just
I am
not
a
on the platform at
scroller,
all?
but somehow I don't have a following. At least not according to TikTok, the crazy numbers.
Oh, yeah, me
but
neither.
people follow me. I don't know why. I posted 6 TikToks and then haven't in a long time. But I'm considering picking it up because I do find it fun and I have these ideas, but I just gotta learn TikTok now. So, and I'm just gonna skip the reels. I'm just kidding. I don't know. We'll talk about that later next time.
Yeah, it's definitely, because I've started posting more on TikTok, and it's definitely not like an educational page or something
Right.
where it's just like, and here's 5 ways to do this.
Right.
It's a lot of like me reacting to other people's stories and just like what most people do on TikTok. It's more of just like
Yeah.
a fun thing, and then every now and then I'll talk about photography, or I'll talk about business or something,
Yeah.
and just kind of throw those in there. They usually don't perform very well, just because I don't have a big following over
Yeah.
there. But
I like
it's
to
fun.
think it could be your own diary. I think
Yeah.
that's like the authenticity of it is very, very appealing to me. And so
Yes.
I'm hoping we'll see. Maybe
Yeah.
I go TikTok famous one day. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I will not take your advice, and I'm going to go follow you on TikTok. I'm gonna wait to see that 7th TikTok that you post.
I'm already embarrassed. That's okay.
Well, cool. Well, Steven, thanks so much for being on the show today. I really enjoyed getting to talk with you.
My pleasure, man.